Hello digital makers and welcome to Digital Making at Home from the Raspberry Pi Foundation. I'm Mark and this week's theme is going to be staying connected. So we're going to look at ways that you can use digital technology to stay in contact with your friends and family. And what I'm going to be showing you how to do today is to make your own very personal chat room that you could share with friends and you could go online and chat with each other. You might also like to check out my mate Christina and my mate Mark's videos. They're going to be making e-cards using Scratch and HTML, so you can send nice little cards to each other. So this week's going to be a bit different again because I'm going to be coding in a language that I'm not particularly familiar with. So I'm going to be making loads of mistakes. I'm sure you're going to see me mess up absolutely loads in this. We're going to be using a language called JavaScript, and we're going to be using a platform to run it on called Node.js. So bear with me if I get things a little bit wrong and I mess up my syntax a little bit. That's absolutely fine. That's the whole process of learning all about coding anyway. You learn by making mistakes, so there's nothing wrong with it. You're going to watch me make mistakes, I'm absolutely sure. What we're going to do is we're going to use the platform Replit again because it supports so many different languages, and also because it's going to allow us to set up this thing called a server that's going to handle all our communication and a client that's going to connect to the server to do the chatting. So let's get started by opening up your web browser. And what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to start off just by going to repl.it. Okay. Now, if you've coded with me on Replit before, I'm sure you've already got an account, so you can just click over this login button here. Or if you haven't, you can click sign up there and you can sign up for Replit. So get yourself an account sorted. Make sure you're logged in. And once you're logged in, what we're going to do is we're going to open up the chat server, which I've already coded for you. It's a really simple little bit of code. I'm going to really quickly talk you through it. But what you can do is you can go to rpf.io/dm-chat. Okay, and what that's going to do is that will take you to my chat server that I've made. Okay, so you can see up here it says Replit at Mark Scott, no chat server. It should say the same for you. And this is the chat server. Now what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to hit on this fork button here, so you've got your own copy of the chat server, and that'll be all on your account then. Okay, so if you hit the fork button, you'll have my copy of this server. So I'm going to really quickly explain what this does. It's not super important for what we're learning today, but this chat server starts off with a bunch of what are called just basically imports at the beginning. So it's just importing some packages for it to use. And it's also setting up a couple of objects. And it's using this library called socket.io, which handles like communication over networks, including the internet. And then we've got these two big blocks of code here. So we've got this function, which is basically just saying this server should just listen all the time. It should be listening, ready for connections, ready for clients to try to connect to it. And we've got this bit of code here. And all this is saying is, when I connect, I'm going to receive messages. They're going to be called message. Okay, they'll be labeled message. And I'm going to emit something with MSG, okay, which is just short for message again. So all this server really is doing is it's listening constantly. And then when it receives a message from a client, it's just going to send it back out to all the other clients that are connected to it. That's literally all this server does. It sits there listening on the internet. Whenever anyone sends a message to this server, it's going to send that message back out to every single connected client to it. All right then. Now, once you've done this, once you've forked it, make sure you click on the start, because over on the right-hand side here, we've got this this like browser window that opens up, and this has got this important URL here, which is your connection, which is the URL of your server, and we need that URL. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is, your one should look like node-chat server, and then probably your Replit username just there with repl.co at the end. But what I need you to do is just click in there, right click, and copy that text. That's really important that we've got that text. Now, in order to be able to show you what it would look like for you, I've logged in using a private browser window, all right? But I'm now going to go to my Replit account to do the next part. So make sure you've copied that text, okay? And then what you can do is you can just create a new REPL. So you can come over here and create a new REPL, which I'm going to do now. So I'm going to go back to Replit, and then I'm not in private browsing anymore, so this should just log me straight into my account. Here we go. and I'm going to create a new REPL. Now the language I want to create this in is going to be Node.js. Mine's fairly close to the top because I've used it recently because I've been practicing this project so much to try and make sure that I get it right for you. As I said, I'm not very familiar with Node.js and JavaScript, so I've been practicing a lot. It's right near the top. But if you can't find it, just type Node.js like that into that thing there, and you will get Node.js, and you can click on it. It'll give it a name. Okay, so it's automatically giving it a random name. I'm going to give it my own name, so I'm going to call it final chat server, because hopefully this will be the last one I have to create for you. I'm going to click on create REPL. And there we go. So I've got my Node.js REPL here. So let me just really quickly explain. Like in REPL, always we have our files down the left-hand side here. We've got our code area here that I can write my code in. And over on the right-hand side here, we've got this Node.js shell. Now, I'm going to spend a little bit of time just explaining to you how Node.js works from my limited understanding. So JavaScript was originally invented as a language to run in a web browser. So, it was a way of making interactive web pages. It was a really cool way of making interactive web pages, but it became huge. It became absolutely massive, became really popular. Now all the browsers support it. So Firefox and Chrome and Edge, Internet Explorer, they all support this language JavaScript. So your browser runs JavaScript code. But people liked writing web pages using JavaScript so much that they also wanted to use JavaScript to write the back-end code, the code that sits on a server on the internet and does a communication between your browser client and the server. So they really wanted to use JavaScript to do that as well, and that's why Node.js was invented. So it uses the same JavaScript interpreter that's in the Chrome web browser. So it just uses that JavaScript interpreter, but it's a way of being able to run JavaScript code on a server like you would run Python code or C code on a server. Okay, so over on the right hand side here we've just got a shell, and this might be really, I can't actually increase the size of this at all. It might be a bit difficult for you to see, but if I just type random stuff, so if I type my name, then it doesn't understand what I mean by that. Okay, it has no idea what mark means, but I can use standard sort of syntax to do things like I can say name equals and then quote mark. All right, and it understands that code. So this shell is interpreting JavaScript for me. So when I now type what is name, it'll come back and tell me that name is Mark. Okay, so this is running just JavaScript there, and then over on the left here, over in the middle here, this is where I'm going to write my JavaScript code, and we'll see the results in the shell here. So we're going to write our client to talk to that server that you just forked. So all this code here is just going to be the client. It's going to talk to that server. Remember, all the server does is it listens out for messages. And when it receives a message, it sends it back to all connected clients. Right then, let's get started. So the first thing we need to do is we need to import some modules, some code into our program. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create what's called a constant. Okay. And that's like a variable that doesn't change. All right. So I'm going to say const, and it's going to be, I'm going to call it IO. That's my name for it. I could call it anything, but it will keep it simple. IO stands for input output. And I'm going to say require, which is JavaScript's way of bringing in external packages. So I'm going to require, and I'm going to require this socket.io-client. Okay. So that's bringing in all the code that I need to be able to set up my program as a client to be able to talk to a server. Now it's JavaScript, so we have to put a little semicolon at the end, just to say that that line's finished. And then I'm going to then set up another little object, and I'm going to call this one readline. And this is going to be const readline equals, and this one is going to use, making mistakes already, the readline module. Okay. Now what readline does is it allows it allows my program to recognize what's typed in the shell over on the right hand side here. You can't see my mouse cursor moving around probably, but over on the right hand side here, okay, it will allow the program to take input, which is called standard in. So anything I type here, okay, so like I was typing Mark earlier, all right, it'll allow the program to be able to receive that text that I type in the shell, but it will also allow it to output text to the shell as well. So that's what readline does. Okay, so we've done our 2 imports. Now let's just run those just to make sure I haven't made any mistakes. I'm going to be doing this quite a lot. And that all looks good. It's installing those packages, and then we've got our shell opening up there. Good. Right, our next line is going to be to set up a connection to that server. All right, that's the next thing we're going to do. And we're going to use that IO object we just created. So I'm going to create another const. I'm going to call this one socket, and it's going to be equal to the IO object, that IO one that I created there. And then I'm just going to put in that address of my server that I copied and pasted. I'm going to paste it in there. So, oh, it needs to be in quotes. Let's just put a quote in there and a quote at the end there. I'm just going to shift that over to the right a little bit so it's all on one line. So that's created now that connection to the server. Okay. When I run this program, it's going to connect to the server. We won't see anything yet. Okay, we won't, because we haven't told it to do anything. We're not sending any messages to the server. We're not receiving any messages from the server. We haven't told our client to do that at the moment. But at the moment, it is now connected to that server that you forked. So remember, what goes in there, that will probably be your Replit username. Otherwise, everything should be the same. Okay, right. Let's now handle that whole read line thing. Taking text that gets typed in over here. Taking text here and being able to read it. I've spelled my own name incorrectly. Being able to read it and being able to write out again. So the way we do that is I'm going to create another constant. I'm going to call it RL, which is short for just readline. And that's going to be equal to a readline dot, and I'm going to say create interface. So create interface is a way of setting up a user interface, so something that a human can then type in and out of the shell. Now, you don't always have to do this kind of thing with Node.js, obviously. Quite a lot of the time, everything will be running automatically, but this is a user interface. Okay, so I'm going to create interface. I'm going to open brackets and then curly brackets. And those curly brackets represent all the code that is attached to this RL object. And then I'm just going to say, oh, the input type is going to be process.standard in. So that's text that gets typed in here, over here, like me typing Mark, yeah. And then the output type, so the output is going to be process.standard out, std out, okay. And that's going to say, all right, you can output here as well. It's not going to do anything yet, but at the moment, but it can do. It will do, I promise. All right. I just put a semicolon in, and I've missed a semicolon over there as well. Let's just be clear about the semicolons with JavaScript. It's really good practice to use them at the end of a line, and if you don't, sometimes you can get all kinds of weird errors. But JavaScript's like really, it allows you to get away with a lot of errors quite a lot of the time. So sometimes you can not put in semicolons and the code will still run fine, but you really should try and do it as much as possible. All right, then where are we going to go next? So we want to now decide what happens, what action is going to happen when my client connects to the server. Okay, so when the client connects to the server, what is going to happen? That's the next thing to decide. Okay, so the way I do that, the syntax for that is I'm going to say socket.on. So that means when a server and the client connect to each other, this is going to what's going to happen. So message will be the label for it, if you like, will be like connect. So I'm going to do that in quotes. Connect. Connect. There we go. Good. Now then, I'm going to use a little bit of syntax here, which is a quick way of creating a function in JavaScript without having to give it a name and do all the proper function syntax. So I'm going to say is, I've got this function, okay, that I'm about to create, and it has no arguments. I don't need to feed any data into the function. Okay, so that's what those open and close parentheses are there. And then the way of getting this function is to go equal sign and the greater than sign, so it makes like a kind of arrow shape. And I'm now saying, right, so when I connect, run this function that I'm about to write, and the function is going to be everything contained within these curly braces. Okay, right, where are we? So I've got socket.connect there. Right. So now what do I want to happen? Well, when it connects, I want my client to ask me to do something. And readline has this handy little method called question. Okay, and the question is going to output some text to the shell, and it's going to wait for me to write an answer, and then it's going to store that answer as a variable. So the question I wanted to ask is, what's your name? And I'm going to put that in backticks. So backticks, I'm using a US keyboard, and I think it's more or less the same on a UK keyboard. The backticks are just below your escape key, but if you're on another language keyboard, you might have to hunt around a little bit for backticks. But they look a little bit like quotes, but they're slanted downwards a little bit. So I'm going to say, what's your name? That's the question that that the shell's going to ask. I'll just put space after there. Okay, and then I need to, when the user then types in an answer, I need to label that as something. So I'm going to label it as answer. Okay. Right, I'm going to get the computer to do something else with that information in a minute. So I'm going to create another one of those cool little functions now there. All right, but I'm not going to put any code in it at the moment. So I'm going to open up my curly braces, but I'm going to leave them blank. All right, I'm not going to put any code in there yet because I just want to test this to make sure it works. Semicolon there, semicolon there, and let's just stop. And we'll run it again. Oh, I've told you I'd make errors. Where have I made an error? Read line is not defined. So there we go. So JavaScript errors can sometimes be a little tricky to figure out. So what I tend to do is I tend to scan through all this text and spot my spelling mistakes, because that's most of the time what I've done. So that should be not read lin. I'm sure a lot of you spotted that at home when you were doing this. That should be read line. Let's do that again, run it again. Hopefully we won't get any errors this time. So I've got nothing down there, and it should be asking me a question. I've done a little bit of debugging, and I'm pretty sure that should be std out, standard out. So let's try again. We'll stop that and we'll run it. And there we go, there's my question this time. That's good. All right then, so I can now type down here. It's asking me what's my name. I hope you can see that. Yeah, you can. It's my picture's not covering it up. And I can type in Mark there, okay? And then nothing happens because I haven't told it to do anything yet. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to move myself up here that way, so we've got more of a view of the shell there. So at the moment, all it's doing is it's printing out what's your name. It's asking me what my name is, but it's not doing anything with it. So we've got this function that we created here, which takes answer as the an argument to it. So answer's going in, so my function can use the value answer. So what should I have my client do? Well, once it's asked for my name, I really want to send that to the server so that the server knows, so the server receives some information. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this command. So within that function that I've created, within this anonymous function here, I'm going to say socket dot emit. And then if you remember on that server we had, when it received stuff, it was labeled as message. That was what we put in. So we're going to say message. Okay, just give it all that text there. So socket.emit message. Okay, so it's going to send some data almost labeled as message. And what do I want it to send? Well, I want it to send who has joined the chat. All right, so I wanted to say, for instance, it's going to say, if I type in Mark, it would say Mark has joined the chat. If I typed in Jimmy, it would say Jimmy has joined the chat. So I need a way of taking a string like this, has joined the chat. Okay, get rid of that text there. So I want a way of being able to put a variable in here. Yeah, so I want that answer to be in here just before it says has joined the chat. So it will say Mark has joined the chat, or as I said, if it was Jimmy, it would be Jimmy has joined the chat. And there's a great way of doing that with JavaScript. What I can do is I can say here, I'm going to put in a variable. I'm going to signal that by using a dollar. Okay, so I'm going to put $sign in there, and then within curly braces, I'm going to put in the variable that I want inserted into that text. So answer has joined the chat, because answer's what I write in. That's that standard in that I put in. So answer has joined the chat. Okay, let's test this out, see whether it works. Fingers crossed. And I go, what's your name? Mark. No, it hasn't worked. What have I done wrong? Socket has joined the chat. Oh, no, I haven't done anything wrong. I haven't done anything wrong yet. Okay, that's good. So what's happened is my server has received that text. My server has received that Mark has joined the chat. But I haven't said, and you know the server, when it receives a message, it just sends it straight back out again. You have to excuse my dog. So when the server receives a message, it's going to transmit it back out to all the clients that are connected to it. But I haven't told my client what to do when it receives a message. So at the moment, my client is receiving this Mark has joined the chat text, but it doesn't know what to do with it. I have to tell it what to do with it. Okay, so let's get on with that. Let's tell it what to do when it receives a message. So I've got that function there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to, I'll look question. So socket.emit there, that ends. Then what I'm going to do is come down here. So that's that function between the curly braces is the function what to do when you answer the question. All right. And now I'm going to write a function to say what should you do when the server sends back some information. So here we go. I'm going to type socket.on, and then this is when I receive that message. Can you remember again on the server we had that MSG? That's what the server sends out. Everything's labeled with MSG. I'm going to say okay, run this function and use the data that you receive. Okay, so it's going to run a function using the data it receives, quote, get rid of that annoying text again. Okay, and what do I want it to do? Well, I wanted to output that message to the console. And in JavaScript, there's a standard way of doing that, which is to say console.log, and then it's going to log data. And just add in some semicolons there to say my lines are done. Okay. I think that's going to work. I could be super confident, but let's let's test it out. Mark. Oh, Mark has joined the chat. Brilliant. Okay, so I've got the start of my chat room now. I've got just the very beginning of a chat room. All right. Now then, you can do this with somebody else now. All right. All you need to do is you need to send them this URL. All right. If they have this URL up here, or you can hit the share button over here and do this URL here, okay? So you can take that URL and you could send it to one of your friends or somebody even in your house. They could load up this REPL, they can run it, all right? And then they will be able to also join the chat. I'm going to pause that for a second. I'm going to pause the video for a second just to demonstrate this to you. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stop this and restart it. And what I've done is I've asked my son to help us out with this one. So I'm sorry if this is a little bit loud into the microphone. Okay, Jimmy, run the client. And he's run the client, so I'm going to type Mark, and it says Mark has joined the chat. Okay, you can do yours. And there we go. Jimmy has joined the chat. I hope you can see that down there. Thank you very much, Jim. Okay, so let's carry on with the rest of our client. Now we've tested that all works fine. So what do I want to do next? Okay, well, at the moment, all it's telling me is that who's joined the chat room. So it's showing that I've joined the chat room and Jimmy could see that I joined the chat room. And then when he joined, it showed me that he joined the chat room as well. But we've got no way of talking to each other yet, and that's what we need next. So I'm just going to come up above this socket.on, and I'm going to create a new function. And this function is going to handle all the chatting back and forth between the users. So I'm just going to type in here function. I'm going to call it chat. It doesn't take any arguments at all. That's fine. And then I'm going to put in those curly braces. All right. And I'm going to use that read line question again. So it's going to ask me another question. So rl.question. And the question it's going to ask is going to be a bit of an odd one. It's just going to ask. It's just going to put in 2 chevrons like that. Okay, so 2 greater than signs. And I'll put a space after them. All right. And it's going to receive an answer. Okay, that I'm going to feed into a function. So I need to do that cool little shortcut for creating functions in JavaScript. There we go. So what do I want it to do with that message? Well, exactly the same as I wanted it to do down here. It's no different from this emit here. Remember, the server, every bit of text it receives, it just sends back to all clients. So what I can say in here is just socket dot emit, and then I can go, let's have that label message, and then I type in the answer. Yeah, so it's just going to take that answer that I give and spit that back out. All right, now, if I run this at the moment, it's not going to do anything, okay? Because it's a function that I've created, right? So I can still type Mark here, and it'll still say Mark has joined the chat, but I can't, you don't see those 2 little chevrons suddenly appear because I haven't called that function anywhere. I haven't called the chat function. So it doesn't know what to do with it yet. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to call that chat function. I'm going to do it in several places as well. I'm going to do it straight after I say that I've joined the chat. So I'm going to say in here, let me put a semicolon on the end of that line. And I'm going to say chat. Okay, I'm also going to do it straight after I receive my console log. Okay, so after anyone else sends me a message, I'm going to call the chat function. And one more place to do it is in the chat function itself. It's a recursive function, so it calls itself. And that means after I've typed in a message, if for some reason, for instance, so if I type in a message, it should automatically spit that message back out at me. All right. And then it would call the chat function because I've told it to down here. But I'm going to future-proof this a little bit because I'm not always going to want that to actually happen. I'm not always going to, in a minute, you'll see why. In a minute, I'm not always going to want it to console log back what's been said. Okay, so I'm also going to call the chat function inside the chat function. That's called recursion. Okay, when a function calls itself. Really useful concept in computer science for lots of different things. Okay, so now we've called that chat function, and let's get a semicolon on the end there. I'm going to send this over to my son again, so we can start hopefully having a little chat down here. So I'm just going to pause my recording for a little bit, and you can pause the video if you want. Get somebody else to log into Replit and have this code up and run it, and then we should be able to demonstrate a little bit of chatting. Let me just pause here. All right then, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this code, and I'm going to shout through to my son again to get him to run it. So Jim, can you refresh? And then once you've refreshed, run the code. All right, let's see if it works. You join first. So hopefully it should say Jimmy has joined the chat. Hey, there Jimmy's joined the chat, and I'm going to join the chat. And Mark has joined the chat, and now you can see I've got those 2 little chevrons down there, and then we should be able to talk to each other. So I should be able to say, how are you, Jimmy? And let's see if he writes a response. I can hear his keyboard. There we go. Brilliant. Okay, so we've now got a chat app. Thank you, Jim. Right then, so let's just stop this now. Right, So I've got a chat app, but you'll notice down here that when I typed "How are you, Jimmy?" it spat straight back out "How are you, Jimmy?" at me. Now remember, that server, when it receives a text message, it just sends it straight back. So it's sending me back what I typed in myself. And that's really not what I want, okay? I don't want it to send back the data that I've typed in, all right? Because otherwise I'm just going to see the same sentences typed twice. So we've got to handle that next. So how are we going to do that? Well, let's go above this function up here and let's create a variable, all right? So in JavaScript, to create a variable, I'm going to say let, all right? And then let my message equal an empty string. Okay. So I've just created an empty string there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, when I type in a message, I'm going to make that message. No, sorry. When I type in a message, I'm going to store that message as the my message variable. Okay, there's my dog again. Okay, so here we go. Here we go. So how do I do that? So in that function chat, in that chat function, that's where I want to store that message. So all I'm going to say in here is I'm going to say in my chat function after here, I'm going to say my message equals and then that answer variable there. Okay. Semicolon at the end. All right. Now then, back down here where I've got this console log. Okay. What I'm going to do is before that console log, I'm going to say if my message, so if the message I just sent, because that's what it's stored as, if my message is not equal to data, okay, so it's not equal to what's just come back from the server, then let's automatically close my curly braces. So I'm just going to delete that one, then do all of that cool stuff there. Okay, and then do I need to close? No, that should be fine. So I've stored the message that I typed. I've stored it as my message. If what comes back to me from the server is the same as my message, then I don't want it to do anything. It's just not going to do anything in this socket.on function that I've written here. But if it's different, so if it's not the message I typed, then it should print it out. Okay, so let's have a look at that and just check whether that works. So let's get my son recruited into this again. Jimmy, can you refresh your browser again? Click run and then join the chat room. Here we go. So I'm going to run it. He's just refreshing a browser, so we're going to wait for him to join. So I'm going to type Mark. Oh, Jimmy's joined the chat. There we go. And Mark has joined the chat as well. And now I'm going to type a message. Hi again. How are you? Hit enter. And do you see it didn't spit back what I've just said? Let's see whether Jimmy responds to me or not. He's not typing on his keyboard at the moment. Oh, now I can hear him typing. And, oh, there we go. Perfect. Thank you. You can go back to watching YouTube videos now. All right. Now, some little things going to bug me about this. So first of all, let's see where it straight away came in and said Jimmy has joined the chat there. That was all right. What's going to get confusing on this is if we've got multiple people on the chat room. Okay, if I've got multiple people in the chat room, I don't know who's talking. So at the moment, I know that that's Jimmy talking and saying thank you because he's the only other person here. But I could have 3 or 4 or 5 people in this chat room and it could get really confusing. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to create another variable up here. So let's just go here underneath where I've said let my message. I'm going to say let my name equal an empty string. Okay. And then in function chat, we're going to make a really quick alteration. So in here, where we send the message, all right, at the moment we're just sending that answer. That's all we're sending to the server. Okay, so just what people have typed in. We're going to make a slight alteration to that. We're going to use that nifty little JavaScript thing where I can insert variables into a string. So I'm going to, first of all, actually, let my name equal that. When they answer the question here, they've answered who has joined. I need to say in here that my name is the same as the answer equals answer. That's it. Okay. Right, so that's set my name as the answer. And then up here, where we send the message to the server, where we typed in, we're also going to send our name with it as well. So I'm going to put my backtick there. I'm going to use $, and it's going to be my name. Oh, I forgot my curly braces there. So my name. There we go. And then answer is also a variable. So I'm just going to put in a colon after that, just so it separates that from the actual message that they're sending. And then I'm going to go $, and then curly brace, answer. Okay, so the message I'm now sending to the server is going to be a concatenation, a joining of my name and the message I want to send with a colon in between. And because I've done that down here, this my message does my message equal data isn't going to work anymore. All right, because what's coming back from the server is different now. What's coming back from the server is different. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy. Do you know what? I didn't close my backticks there, did I? Close my backticks. That's better. Okay. So now I'm just going to copy that, and that is going to go in here instead of my message. Yeah. So instead of no, let's change it actually. Let's change where my message is. Instead of my message equals answer, let's put it there. That's good. So now my message is going to be a concatenation of my name and whatever I've typed in. And then that bottom function should still work. Fingers crossed. Let's give this a go. So one last time. Let's try this out. I'm just going to stop and run. And then just might need to turn your speakers down a little bit while I shout to my son. One more time, Jimmy, can you refresh? Yeah. So here we go. You join first. Just going to wait for Jimmy to join. Here we go, Jimmy has joined, Mark joined. Hi there, Jimmy. And then let's see, hopefully what he types back. Yay, brilliant. So you can see it's got Jimmy, colon, and then hi. And now we've got a proper functioning chat room. That's perfect, Jim. Thank you. So there we go. That's our chat room completely made. There's more stuff you could do with this, though. There is more stuff you could do. I'm going to really quickly show you another one that I made over here. Okay. Now this one uses a clever little package called Chalk. Okay. So what you could do is you could use Chalk to do stuff like color codes. So different users have different colors in the messaging app. So Jimmy might always be aquamarine, and I might always be magenta. So we can change the colors around. You can shove emoji in here as well. Okay, so you could even have it so that it has little emoji for different people as well. They could assign random emojis. There's plenty you could do with this. Okay, so you take this, have a search around on the internet, see what you could do, have a play around, and then please do share anything you want to share with us on rpf.io/home. Otherwise, you stay connected with all your friends and family using your very own personal chat app. Okay, I'm going to head off now, guys. So thank you very much. Thank you to Jimmy, and I shall see you all next week. Bye-bye.